Hey everyone, it's Friday again, so it's time for another Friday video. Yay! And this time I was thinking about my subject and I wasn't too sure about what I should do. But then I decided, well, maybe I should work on a tutorial this time. And as I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, here is a tutorial. Yay! There is a time lapse in it, I must admit it. However, I will be explaining more about the process and the tricks I use for this part. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the tutorial. So, what's it about? It's about shrink foil. And shrink foil is a thermoplastic which can be drawn on, and if you put it in the oven on a nice high temperature, the foil will shrink. It will become 3 times smaller, around 3 times, and it will become around 9 times thicker. So you get really cute little pieces actually, and those pieces you can use for charms or a keychain, maybe a magnet. So if you want to make something cute and unique, shrink foil is the way to go. They look like acrylic charms actually. However, I wouldn't recommend using shrink foil to make your charms for convention or something like that, because there are special kind of shrink foil on which you can print. However, you have to put each piece in the oven, and it's recommended to put one piece at a time. So if you have 20 pieces or 20 charms you want to make, you have to put it 20 times in the oven, and it doesn't take long, I have to admit, but it's a lot of work, so I wouldn't recommend it for that. But for unique charms, it's the way to go. So in this video I'm using a transparent sheet with sanded side, which means I can use colored pencils on it, because the colored pencil has some grip and doesn't just blow away. There are also other colors and kinds of shrink foil. You have black, white, you have neon colored sheets, and just clear sheets. Those usually are very smooth and you can't use your colored pencils on it. So be aware if you're buying your sheets, look at what the properties are of the piece. I myself never had colored ones. I have some white ones and those are smooth. I haven't used them because I like the transparency of the ones I'm using. So, and if you want to buy it, go on the internet, put in shrink foil, and Amazon or Bol or any other web shop with creative things usually has something like shrink foil. So it's widely available, I would say. And as you can see in the background, I am already doing something. So what am I doing with that shrink foil? Well, I have been using it for a bit. However, it has been a while since I used shrink foil, and I have new materials, so I'm testing my materials out on the sheet. I think it's always a good idea to test out your materials before you are going for the full piece. It would be a shame if the material didn't do what you expect. So that would be bad. I've had some experience with it and it doesn't feel good. So that's why I'm testing it out. I am using different paint markers. I showed you the markers, but because of my recording, Some are upside down. I apologize for that. But I used some brandless gel pen. I used dilutions, marble black paint marker. I used Uni Posca markers. I love those. They are so bright and colorful. And I added some pencil. I added the dimensions on my test strip so I could look up what the dimensions are after the shrinking. I added grey pencil and the colored pencils from Faber-Castell, from Prismacolor, and the Derwent soft color pencils. And as you can see, I flip also regularly. And the reason for that is because it's transparent and some effects are different than you expect. For example, if you work with highlights, sometimes you add those as a detail at the end. However, if you are going to color your whole piece with colored pencil and add details at the end, you won't see those beautiful highlights on the other side. And that isn't necessarily a problem, especially if you are making it a magnet. If you put a little magnet on the back and place it on the fridge, freezer, whatever floats your boat, you don't see the back. However, with keychains and charms, you do see the back, and I like the sides to be beautiful on both sides. So yay, that's the reason. With paint markers, they do wonders. They are bright, they are sharp. However, the texture on the paper is very interesting. Sometimes you have long little dents in your shrink foil, and that's not a problem. With the colored pencil, you press a bit harder and it does its job. However, if you have ink or a marker which is very juicy and flowing and really nice and saturated, things can get hairy. Like literally, your line can turn out a bit hairy because it flows in those little dents next to the line, and you get a weird, interesting texture. In my piece I made, the first lines I put on the sheet, they had very interesting shapes. I will show you later when I start with my piece because I recorded it. Record everything, yay. So that's wonderful. And with the materials, do I have anything else? I read on the internet you can use acrylic paints. However, I am not a big fan of it, especially with acrylics. Acrylics is some sort of plastic as well, and I don't know how the oven will react on it. So you can experiment with it, but just be very careful with it. Don't be very mindful about it. Let's keep it that way. Here is some footage of the shrinking. As you can see, it curls up pretty much and then it lays down flat again. I've sped up the process because it took over 3 minutes. So to prevent boring you, let's speed it up. And as you can see, it became very small and very thick. So it did its job. But enough with all the experiments and tryouts, it's time to create that wonderful piece. I drew Kai, my D&D character, on a separate piece of paper, and I do this because if I make a mistake or something happens, I can retrace it again without damaging the original piece. So that's the reason why. And as you can see, I am working with the dilutions pen first. And the dilutions pen is very juicy and the ink is a bit thin. So you create those wonderful hairy lines with it. So as you can see, here's the example. I started over again and I decided to work with my gel pen, which did wonders. I am drawing the basic lines first. I will make them more fancy and a bit thicker after it's dried a bit and if I have the base down, because of the black lines of my underdrawing, and not everything is as clear as I would like. So that's why I will improvise a bit later with it. And here you see me refining the lines again. I take the sketch away from underneath the sheet and I am reworking those lines. And I make them thicker in some spots. I make them a bit more fancy where needed. Eyes needed a bit more blackness. And basically you're making the image more clear, which is fun to do, but you have to be careful not to smudge everything because it doesn't respond as ordinary paper, so sometimes it stays wet a bit longer, so you have to be careful with that. So here you see me picking all the colors I need, because colors you never have enough, and I wanted to keep it a red, brown, warm scheme, so that's why those colors are very apparent. And now, the piece de resistance. It's time to color. As I mentioned before, you have to keep the back in mind as well. So that's why I like to turn my sheet around sometimes. And it works wonders because you can see, hey, does it show up? Is it properly? Things like that. I started with the widest highlight I could think of in the hair, and I added white first, then a little lighter color, orangey color, and then I added his reddish brown hair, because I made sure the highlight was added first. It shows up. So that's basically what you have to keep in mind. What do I want to show it on the other side or not? You can also play with it. For example, if you want someone to see certain parts on the back and not at the front, you can do that by adding the color first, or the little drawing, or whatever floats your boat, and then draw over it with a paint marker or colored pencil or whatever you want. So that's not a big issue. As I mentioned before, you have to be careful with inks and things like that. Some paints and inks dry rather quickly because they are it's in their blood, to say it. Some materials just take longer. And I experienced it with the gel pen. Even if it fully dried, it's still a bit sensitive to colors, so it smudges quite easily. I experienced it with the colored pencils. Sometimes they took the color, and with darker colors it isn't a big of a problem. However, with lighter colors it sucks to say the least. So after adding all the colors, I didn't add that special techniques this time, only keeping in mind what I wanted to show. I started refining because the lines can get covered with little pieces of your colored pencils and things like that. So to strengthen them again, I went over with the black gel pen. And finally, I cut the piece. I used a perforator for the little hole, and I cut out the piece very carefully. It's not very flexible, so you have to be careful with cutting it. If you don't be careful, you can ruin your edges. You can get strange little cuts, so you don't want that. So after the baking on 150 degrees for around 3 minutes in the oven, here is the final result. And I must admit, I made a second one. The one in the video, it didn't turn out very good. I must admit, here it is. What happened, I don't know. The foil just stuck to the little piece and it made a bit of a mess of it. As you can see, there are bumps and it isn't as smooth as I want it to be. The second one is way better, it's way flatter and it looks good, better. I made some adjustments in the coloring, the white is a bit more intense, so that's good. And I learned my lessons. Aluminium foil isn't always the best one. So, I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you learned a bit more about shrink foil, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!